Hello and welcome to another Ask a Beekeeper. It's so nice for you to log in and join me tonight. So welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Nick Hoefly. I am the NYC Beekeeper, and this is our monthly series where you ask your questions live, and hopefully I've got some good answers for you. I'm going to go ahead and have you start putting in your questions right now into the chat. We're going to go right off the bat with these questions. But first, I actually want to run through a few things before we start answering those questions. The first thing, I want to say thanks to Master Apiaries for sponsoring this series. If you want the best New York City honey around, or other great honey varietals, if you're looking for some hive tours here in New York City, if you are a beekeeper here in the city or in the area that is looking for a helping hand, maybe a house call to come out and help you diagnose a problem with your hive, or monthly mentoring, please give Master Apiaries a call. We can set you up with whatever you need. We can help you with your bees and make sure that they're thriving for you this season. If you would like to get in and see some of the more geekier things that I'm doing with beekeeping, you can check me out at the nycbeekeeper.com. That's my blog. I'm posting about weekly there, and you can also sign up for my monthly newsletter. I also have a behind-the-scenes content area with my Patreon page if you choose to support through that as well. But all of this stuff does help me do events like these, free things where I can engage with people and try to help with your beekeeping questions and make you become a better beekeeper, because that's what we're all trying to do eventually. You don't have to be a beekeeper to be on this call or on this stream and ask questions. So whether you're a beekeeper or not, please, if you have a question, the only dumb questions are the ones you didn't ask. So please feel free to drop it in the comments if you're on Facebook. If you are watching this on YouTube, there is a chat box just to the right of this frame that you can ask your questions in. I'll see everyone's questions as they come in, and we'll do our best to get you some good answers, and we'll answer as many questions as we can in the time that we have. But be forewarned that all of my answers are going to come from the point of view of a beekeeper in the New York City area. So this might pertain more towards beekeeping in the Northeast of the United States, but the general ideas, the general thoughts will carry over to wherever you are keeping bees. Your timing in the season might just be a little bit different. But speaking of location and where everybody is, I'd love it if you would drop your city and state in the comments and let me know where you're from. Where are you watching from? If you are watching from New York City, I'd love for you to put your neighborhood. We see which boroughs showing up and representing there in the comments. So with that, and for anybody who hasn't been here before, real quick, I'll introduce myself again. My name is Nick Hoefly. I'm the NYC Beekeeper. I'm a professional urban beekeeper here in New York City. I'm taking care of hives up on rooftops, in backyards, in a cemetery, on top of buildings in Manhattan, and in, backyards here in Queens and Brooklyn and so on. So it's a little bit different setting than most beekeepers, but a lot of the things that we do, you would also do if you were a suburban or a more rural beekeeper. You just won't have an edge of a roof to fall off of, or have to carry your equipment down a narrow alleyway to get to your beehives. So I'm seeing a lot of good questions coming in. We're going to get to these in just a moment, but I do like to start these off with a quick beekeeper's calendar update of what's going on with hives here in the city. So this is my little slide here about what you should be doing if you are keeping bees in the New York City area. Again, this will shift a little bit depending on where you are, but this is a good practice for all kinds of winter beekeeping wherever you are. So this time of year is not the most exciting time of our beekeeping season, but it is a very critical time. We want to make sure that we're aware of our hives that are still alive and have survived to this point. We want to make sure that they can survive through the end of that winter time. So we want to do light inspections, and for me that's popping the lid, checking to see if the bees are up against the inner cover. Also, on a nice warm day, which we've had some very nice days lately here in the city, you may pop open a box, tip back a box, and see where the bees are in your hive. This is really helpful and will really give you a sense of the size of the cluster, but it's not necessary to really take out frames right now. That brood nest that the queen is working on right now is still pretty small, and the bees that are in there have been working hard all winter to keep the temperature just right. So we don't want to leave it open for too long, but just checking in to see what's going on is something good to do. If they are up against that inner cover, you want to make sure to start feeding your bees ASAP. That's their signal to you that they're ready for food. So get in there, get them some sort of dry feed. That could be anything from white granulated sugar, and with like the mountain camp method, you could get some winter patties or make your own winter patties. You could get some fondant or even make a candy board. These are all good options, just something to put some emergency food on the bees to make sure that they're not going to starve for the rest of the winter. But the key to this is to make sure they're not going to starve for the rest of winter. And on warmer weeks like we've had this past week, you're going to have bees that are going to be going through their food a lot quicker. So make sure to check in on them once a week, maybe once every other week, to see how fast they're consuming that winter patty or the fondant, and replace it as needed until they absolutely don't need it anymore. Until they get to some blooms, maybe later in March or even into April, when they start finding enough food out and about for them on their own. So it's just something you don't want to just put one in and walk away and say you're done. Unfortunately, we do lose hives at this time of year. Some folks have had real trouble and lost all their hives by now. So an important thing to get out to do is to clean out your hives. Make sure that you're getting all the dead bees, that dead cluster that's all still between the frames, you're getting them out of there and clearing them out before they start molding or even decaying inside the comb. The worst thing that can happen is that they really start decomposing, and first they're going to destroy the comb, which is like gold to a beekeeper. You want to preserve that as best you can. And then the other thing is that once they start decomposing or decaying, there's going to be other things that might be interested in them, that might climb into your hive, or that might realize that there's honey in your hive that is no longer protected by bees. So it's important to get all of those assets, all of those valuable parts of your hive cleaned up and out of there. Get all the dead bees out and store your equipment the best you can so that you can reuse it this spring when you get your next package or get a new nuke. If you do have a hive that is still living and you have honey on a dead hive, you can collect all that honey and simply put it in a box and put that box right on top of your top box of the living hive. You certainly want to check to make sure that there's no major disease or any other bad signs in your in that box that you're going to move over. But it's a good way to give those resources to the other colony, to give them a little bit more time to get through the winter, and they will help protect and preserve that comb so that you can use it either on them for this season, or you can eventually take it off and use it on another colony. So that's a really good reason to get out and clean up anything that's died at this point, and just get it ready for the season. Ordering and repairing both equipment and bees is important right now because number one, packages will be selling out quickly. At Astor Apiaries, we have sold out of our packages for the season. We're done already. I think it was 2 weeks ago that we sold the last one. So There are going to be a lot more apiaries and a lot more distributors like us who are going to start running out of packages. Now is the time to get it, especially if you know you need them. If you are pulling your equipment off of dead hives, or if you have broken equipment from last season, you want to make sure that that equipment is in good repair. Throwing an extra nail or a screw in a joint will help that box last a year or two longer and save you from having to buy new equipment. So that's always good to do. And then if you're going to get new equipment, you want to get it put together and you want to get it painted and all of that well before you go to put bees in it. So now is a great time. You got plenty of time until April or even May when your bees will arrive. And then finally, you still have plenty of time to take a class or a course. If you are a new beekeeper, spend the money on a class. It will save you a lot of pain and suffering later on, and a lot of money later on. So take a class so you know what you're getting into. And if you do have a good bee club around you, join a bee club. That's one of the best investments that I ever made, and it's only in the range of like $30, $35 a year to be in a bee club, maybe less where you are, and you're set. So we have an excellent club. I'm a member of the Long Island Beekeepers Club, but there's lots of great clubs in New Jersey. As you go up into New York State, Connecticut has some excellent clubs. And then of course, wherever you are in the country, I see some folks. We've got Delaware, we've got California. Let's see some other ones here. All right, we've got someone from Australia. Awesome. Very exciting. Well, I'm glad you all are on, and I hope you have a good club in your area that you can join, because for that as well, you don't have to be a beekeeper to be in a bee club. You can just go and enjoy the speakers and talking to all the beekeeping folks who have stories and lots to share. So anyway, with that was my first 10 minutes. I wanted to get that all out there and make sure everybody's kind of on the same page with what to be expecting this month. We're going to do this at the beginning of every one of these sessions, so check in for that for future ones. But now is the time we're going to get to your questions. I'm going to start going through these over here and see what we've got to work with. I see lots of good questions already. Okay, so we're going to start out with a mite treatment comment, because it's never too early to start getting a strategy together for mite treatments. So this one comes from Josie. Let's see, here we go. It says, hi, do you think it's better to do mite treatment on a schedule or only when needed? So this is a great question. And thanks for being our first question of the night, Josie. So my short answer is that I only treat when it's needed. So that might sound like, well, I just go out and, if my bees look sick, then I'll treat. But that's not really what is happening. I am going out monthly, typically during the first week of the month. I will go out and do a mite count on my hives. If I have a few yards that have maybe, I don't know, I think the biggest yard I have is about 10 hives. So at a yard like that, I might only do 3 or 4 to the hives, just to kind of get a sense, maybe 5 of the hives, so we'll get half, but I'm not checking them all. But I am doing mite counts monthly so that I can get a sense of how quickly the mites are building up. And if my mites are staying below about 2 mites per 100 bees, which I'm doing alcohol washes. You can also do a sugar roll, and these are things you can Google later on, or even visit the Honeybee Health Coalition website, which is the honeybeehealthcoalition.com. And they have excellent resources for setting a varroa mite strategy, for using treatments. I think they have how-to videos for all the treatments and how to do a mite count and all of that. So definitely check that out. But since I'm doing those mite counts every month, I am well aware and I'm very acquainted with the mite load in my hives, and that helps me be a little bit proactive, so that once I see the count go over my threshold, which is typically 2, in the fall time, I might let it go to 3 mites per 100 bees, but anything past that, and I'm going to be treating. So I'm only treating when I am getting when I'm breaking that threshold, or when the hive is breaking that threshold. The other caveat to that is that I'm treating a whole yard, even if one hive is above the threshold. So if I am in a yard with 10 hives and they're all at 0 and one hive is at 4, I'm treating the whole yard regardless. And that's just to make sure that I'm not just pushing the mites to another hive by only treating one hive. So it's kind of on a schedule, but I'm not treating every single time regularly, like on a schedule. I'm just treating when needed. So thanks again for that question. Let's move on to another one here. Okay, we have this question here from Kylie, and I'm going to go through this. It looks a little bit. I'm going to read this out here. So Kylie has an old hive that has not been inspected in a while. They went to inspect it, but could only lift 3 frames at a time. Comb had been built across the frames. Any easy way of doing this, or should they just be left? So this is something that will happen if you are not carefully managing your combs. This happens if you are starting with new equipment and there's lots of empty space, especially with foundationless frames or frames that don't come with any plastic or beeswax foundation. The bees will build comb in them, and if you encourage the bees and you keep the bees guided to build along the frames, they will, and they will build beautiful frames. But if you step back and you let the bees just do whatever they like, they don't always stick to the frames, and you'll actually get what's called cross comb. Some beekeepers call it crazy comb, but it's when the bees don't follow the frames at all and they just build across them. The main reason that you don't want this to happen is because then you can't inspect. So if you do get something terrible like American foul brood, you will not know until it's too late, or until your hive is spreading it or infecting other hives that you can check. And so it's important, if you're going to keep bees, you should keep them in movable frame equipment. And not all equipment is equal, and some equipment has more movable frames than others, but it's important to be able to inspect the hives at least every once in a while, just to make sure that they're not harboring anything that you can spread to your own hives or to the hives of beekeepers around you. So whenever I find cross comb, immediately I go in and I try to repair. I try to cut pieces and bend pieces back and make sure the bees are working with the frames instead of across them. So great question. And I appreciate you submitting it. Let's see here. Tracy would like to know about spring mite treatments. So mite treatments in general, there's different strategies to use when you are going through. For me, and kind of the philosophy that I take with it, is that any mite that I can kill today is 2 or 3 mites that I'll have to kill tomorrow if I don't kill the one today. So there are treatments that you can apply in the springtime, and depending on where you are, and I think, let's see, yes, this is Tracy from Brooklyn. I think you put a comment on a blog post on the website, so good to see you here tonight. But yeah, so here in the city, we don't get really into the 50s until, I don't know, probably into April. It can usually stay pretty cold, but we're not getting into like daytime temperatures solidly in the 50s until then. And one of the treatments that you can use on the hives in the spring is Formic Pro, or Mite Away Quick Strips, which is the active ingredient is formic acid. Those are used between, I believe it's 55 and 85 degrees for daytime temperatures. So that's a pretty decent spring mite treatment. If you are installing a package, this is something I do with all of my packages, but within the first about 6 days, because I'm putting my packages typically onto comb, within the first 6 days, any eggs that are laid by the queen will not have been capped yet. So I have time to put an oxalic acid vapor treatment on the colony and expose all the mites that might have been on those bees in that package. I can expose them all to the oxalic acid and try to kill as many as possible. So I'll usually do that when I'm going out to check to see if the queens have been released from their cages in the packages. It just depends, but that's a good one. At a certain point, though, during the spring buildup, there's going to be so much brood in a overwintered colony that there's just no reason to use oxalic acid vapor, because it doesn't work on mites that are in the brood, and that's usually where like 80% of the mites are anyway. So that's something that you want to think about when you're treating. There's some other treatments that you might want to use in the springtime before the nectar flow, because they can't be on while you have your honey supers on, or while there's any honey on the hive that's going to be consumed by humans. So you want to use those treatments either before or after your honey supers are on. And so there's lots of information out there. And I'm going to actually just repeat the Honeybee Health Coalition website. Let me see if I can get it here on a little graphic. Yeah, we're going to get this link here. I'm going to put it in the chat or in a comment for everybody. But they have an excellent Varroa management decision tool, I believe is what it's called. And then they have a whole PDF on how to use every treatment, every approved treatment that's out there, and along with videos and other things to use. So yeah, let's get this in the chat for you guys. Yeah, there we go. So check them out. Save that link, bookmark it, and check out their information, because they've got a lot of really great information, and they tell you exactly when to put on things, as well as how effective different treatments are, because not all treatments are the same. So they will give you the best best information on specific treatments like that. So thanks for that, Tracy. So we're using a little bit different platform today. Let me know if you like having the graphics on. I think it looks a little bit better than the Zoom we attempted last month. And we're actually streaming. We had some technical difficulties last month to where we couldn't really stream beyond the Zoom call, which stinks. If you do want to see what we talked about last month, I have that recording up on my YouTube page. So you can go find me on YouTube and check out the latest video that's up there. And it's there along with a table of contents in the description that tells you all the time codes of when the different questions were asked. And so check that out if you're interested in any of those things. We've got 2 questions from John. So let's see here, John. Here we go. Getting 2 nukes in a few weeks. What are your suggestions around mite treatments? Treat immediately, test, wait for a test. And then number 2, starting with all new hive frames and foundations. Foundations were purchased waxed. Do you suggest adding fresh wax before putting into the hives? 2 good questions. I'll try not to repeat myself too much on mite treatments and which ones you should do or whatever, but when I get, if I get a nucleus colony and I'm going to install them, it really depends. Hopefully the beekeeper you're getting them from has really packed them full of bees. And if so, then they can serve to lose a sample of bees that you could put through an alcohol wash and test. Hopefully you're getting a colony from a reputable source who has been managing their mite loads appropriately. So hopefully you don't have to worry about mites at all. But it's good to do an alcohol wash and see what's going on. If you do really have a problem, then that can either prompt you to go and figure out what kind of treatment you're going to put on, or if it's really serious and the bees are not looking healthy, then you might just take back that nuke to the beekeeper and ask for a replacement. Sometimes you get the odd colony that just does not fare well with any load of mites. So it's not necessarily that the beekeeper was giving you something bad or purposefully did it, but sometimes it happens, and hopefully they'll honor a refund or a replacement or something to rectify that issue. If you do find that they are, if you've got mites that are above a certain threshold, and it's good temperatures out, then Formic is a great way to knock out the mites. You might just have to use 1 strip instead of 2, since you're dealing with basically a 5-frame hive over a 10-frame hive. Just something you'll have to kind of do on a case-by-case basis. But your other question is about equipment, so we can kind of expand on that a little bit. So you've got all new hive equipment, it sounds like, with waxed foundations. There's beekeepers out there who will tell you that, yes, absolutely, re-wax the foundations, load them full, and the bees will take right to them. And that is true. The more wax you put on there, the more you cover up the plastic, the more the bees will take them. The bees don't really like plastic. They want to cover it up whenever they can. So a lot of times you find them building comb on top of or around plastic frames. So plastic foundation, if you can cover it up, great. Uh, but there's also I've had lots of colonies that I didn't add extra wax to the plastic frames. They already had a coating, and the bees took to them. And it's also a function of making sure that they have enough resources coming in the hive, meaning nutrition. So they can only really make wax and build comb when there's a good nectar flow, when they have a lot of extra nectar coming in the colony. And if you're trying to build wax, during the dearth of the summer or too early in the season, you're not going to see anything. They're not going to be building, and you may think, oh, they just don't like the plastic, when really they don't really have the resources they need to build. So you can encourage them to build comb by keeping them fed, and in the springtime you can give them syrup and just keep the syrup coming until they stop taking it, and they will build out beautiful white comb from that syrup. So that will help. But if you have the time and you have all the area to get a little messy with wax and paint on wax onto all those foundations, that will absolutely encourage the bees to use it more readily. And with the equipment in general, putting even on foundationless frames, if you go in and melt wax or even rub wax across the bottom of the top bar of the frame, that will also help the bees know where to draw the comb, so that they're not drawing comb across frames like we were talking about earlier. So that can help. Something interesting, and there was another Master Beekeeper friend of mine here in the city who, when he was getting certified, he did his final project on the roughness of the inside of the hive and how that affected the health of the bees. And a big thing about that was how much propolis the bees spread on the inside of the hive, on the more rough wood of the hive, if it was banged up and dented up or scraped up inside. And it was to encourage this propolis envelope inside. Propolis is antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral, and it's really the colony's first line of defense. So what some people will do is they will actually take their propolis, they'll collect it over the season, scrape it out, or at the end of the season, or in the wintertime, they'll actually go and scrape out all of the propolis from last season, collect it all into a jar with some alcohol and let it dissolve. And then you can paint that on the inside of your hive to kind of help the bees polish the inside of the hive with propolis. I think it gives them a familiar smell, and it, of course, the alcohol evaporates and it just leaves the propolis behind. And you give them a surface that they're kind of used to already, and hopefully they just add to it. So there's lots of ways you can kind of encourage the bees and get them to, get more settled in their hive. I'm going to go and kind of knock down everything I just said by also suggesting that honeybees will make a colony wherever they find a suitable cavity. And in rural areas, not even rural areas, in areas where you find something like an old tractor tire, or a water main enclosure in the ground, if the bees find that it has the right volume and it's safe and it's not being knocked around and messed about, they will set up their colony right in that. There's no beekeeper to put beeswax inside that. There's nothing going on. That's rubber and plastic, and the bees set up shop. This happens all the time in buildings where they find a little opening in between the bricks or the siding of a wall, and they go in and they build out a whole colony inside of a wall cavity. So we can pour as much love and as much effort as we want to in our hives. But at a certain point, we're doing that for ourselves as opposed to for the bees, you know? So, all this stuff, do it within reason. If you really enjoy it and you really want to, you know, give it the 110% on going to town on these frames or painting up the hives just like you want to, you should absolutely do that. If that makes you happy, this is a hobby for most people, and you should be able to enjoy your hobby. So I say go for it, but don't get too wrapped up about what the bees will actually do, because they don't need all of that effort. They don't need everything to be perfect or fancy or whatever. They just need a cavity of the right space that is not being bothered too much, and they're good to go. So that was a very long answer to your equipment question, but I hope that helped. I agree. 2 hives, plenty of time. Absolutely. The first year I was a beekeeper, the first year I was learning, it was a hobby for me. I actually had 1 hive, and a friend of mine also purchased a hive, and they brought their hive and put it on my roof, and we had a blast that year. We spent hours on the roof watching the bees, taking pictures of the bees, looking at frames, and we probably were opening the hive way too much, but you can spend as much time as you want on 1 or 2 hives. These days, I'm taking care of about 60 hives, depending on time of the year and what's going on, and so I have to be a little bit more efficient when I'm going through, which is why, you know, the answers I'm giving you are from a certain perspective, and not everything I say needs to be gospel or needs to be, you know, what everybody follows, but these are just some of the ways that I do things and how I move through beekeeping. So let's see here. We're going to go to a question from, so I've got 2 questions here from KT. The first one, what should we do with bunches of dead bees? Can they be used as garden compost? Yes, that's my answer to that. Yes, absolutely, they can be used as garden compost. In fact, that's probably the best thing that you can do with them, because if you bundle them up and you put them in a bag, put them in the garbage can, they're just going to get more disgusting and gross. They could attract other things that might want to help them decompose. So the quicker you can get them into some compost, the better. And really, unless the hive had really gotten into some like pesticide or some other harmful chemical and died from that, I don't see any reason why composting them would be a bad thing. Honeybees are generally not going to be like completely doused in chemicals or pesticides or anything like that. So I think generally you're okay. But if you have a doubt, bag them up, put them in the garbage, and let the garbage men truck them away. But something else that you can do with dead bees, and for anybody who's crafty, which I may run and grab something real quick just to show off that I've been messing with, but what you can do with dead bees, if you find bees that have died and are by themselves and have dried out enough, you can actually take them, and there are ways to pose them a little bit, and then you can cast them into resin. And I've actually, as I've gone out, I've had several dead hives to clean out, and I've been able to collect some of the queens from those hives. So I have about 6 queens right now that I have been uh, I put in like a humid a humidity chamber to try to loosen them up a little bit, and then I pin them out and pose them, and hopefully I'll be able to cast them in resin sometime soon. But that's something you can do, especially if you go out and do any type of show and tell with your bees. You don't have to be a master beekeeper to get an observation hive, or to, go to a local community event and talk about bees, or show off your bees. And if you're really crafty and you can make little resin casts of the bees, then you can take actual bees and put it in someone's hand and show them the scale and the different casts of the bees. And it's something very cool for people, because bees and wasps and other stinging insects are something that most people don't have right in the palm of their hand. So that's what I'm trying to do with these queens that I've recently gotten. But there's lots of stuff, lots of artists who use dead bees and dead insects in general for different things. But if you're not going to do all those things with them, compost is great. And it looks like you have a second question here. What's the best way to store your bee suit in the winter? I don't have a very specific answer for this. I'm usually wear bee jackets with the fencing veil, and my bee jacket is just hanging up on a coat hook. So that's where it sits until I need it. Or I usually have one in the back of my truck that is just always in the back of my truck. So yeah, there's nothing, anything that any way that you would store clothing in general for the changing of the seasons. If you're going to put away your summer clothes during the winter time and vice versa, the only thing about your bee suit is that you might want to hold on to it so that in the winter time, if you do have warm days and you want to go out to your hive, that it's handy and that you can throw it on real quick and go check your hive. This week, like I said, here in New York City, it's been beautiful, and you'd be crazy not to get out and check the bees this past week. So I'm glad my bee suit is handy. But if you got to store it, store it like you do other clothes. All right, I've skipped over a few questions, so we're going to kind of come back around and look at a few here. I do see somebody from Facebook is asking about a vacant position as a beekeeper, and unfortunately, I have nothing for you right now. So, you'll have to look elsewhere. Most beekeepers in cities are doing this kind of as a one-person type enterprise. Some others are luckier to have, maybe an assistant, or, maybe a couple beekeepers got together and formed a business and they're able to do that. But at least from my experience here in New York City, there's not a huge need for beekeepers at the local apiaries, but it's never a bad thing to always keep an ear out. We're going to come back here to our Australian friend, Kylie. Let's see. The question is, to smoke or to spray sugar water? My bees are vicious with smoke, but completely docile and asleep on the occasion my smoker went out, hence no smoke. So, yeah, this is, I don't know how different the bees are in Australia versus here in the US. I would assume they're fairly similar. I don't know if maybe you have a couple breeds that are a little bit different or behave a little bit differently than the general breeds we have here. But for me, I typically only have smoke with me. That usually does a pretty good job, especially on nicer days, like real sunny, clean, nice days, there's lots of times I go into a hive without even lighting the smoker. Of course, if you're going to spray them with sugar water, they're going to love that and be very focused on lapping all that up. And any of that syrup that you actually spray onto their wings is going to cause them to not be able to fly. So even better for you that you're not going to have them flying up at you. But yeah, that's unfortunate that they don't like the smoke that much that they're coming at you. So yeah, that's my thing. I would say smoke, but if smoke doesn't work, then go with the sugar water spray. There are a lot of things in beekeeping that other beekeepers will swear it's got to be this way, or it's got to be that way, or this is the only way to do it. And the more time you spend with beekeepers, the more you realize that it's whatever way that works. So if it works better for you to just spray your bees, then you just learn to take a spray bottle with you every time instead of a smoker. And just be prepared if you're, to be a little stickier instead of smelling smokier like I end up smelling. So yeah, that's what I would say to that. I would love to hear from any of the folks in Delaware, North Carolina, outside of kind of the Northeast, even California if you're still on. What point are we at in your season? What kind of things are going on for you? Have you gotten to any nectar flows, or have you already received your bees for the season? I know down south there's lots of folks who are holding up full frames of brood, maybe down in Texas. But that's the thing about beekeeping is it's for people even in a similar area. There can be such small differences in weather and in location that make a huge difference in beekeeping, in when you're doing things. And for instance, here in New York City, we tend to stay 5 to 10 degrees warmer than the surrounding area. And for all of my beekeeping friends out on Long Island, sometimes that means that they can be up to 2 weeks behind where we are, and it's less than an hour drive to go see their hives. So it's amazing that even though we're not really going north or south, we're just kind of going east to go and look at their hives. There's that much of a difference in climate and what's going on with with what the bees are working with and how they're reacting to everything. So if you can imagine going from somewhere like where my parents lived down in Central Florida, where there's not really a winter, maybe they're getting their coldest weather now, or they just got through it, but there the bees really don't have to cluster up or go through any type of harsh winter, and they don't have that kind of season. They just kind of slow down enough, and then they come back going through. Now they may have longer periods of heat, longer dearths to get through, so the problems might just kind of swap out for one another, where we have to deal with these winters up here. But even when I say stuff like that, the winters we're dealing with, this winter has not been bad at all. And then you go up even further, like into Canada, where you have beekeepers who are putting their hives in warehouses for 5 months out of the year. to get them through the winter, and when they're putting them back out in the springtime, which might be as late as May, there's still snow on the ground, and the bees are figuring it out, and they're waiting till the right time and trying to work with all of the ecosystem, the blooms, everything that's going on there. So it's really interesting to see beekeeping through all these different perspectives. And I'm sure even in when we're talking about beekeeping, not just in the US, but if you go down to the Southern Hemisphere right now, your seasons are completely opposite from us. So your season is going to be ending just as ours is beginning. And yeah, it's just such an interesting difference. Something can be so different, but the same everywhere as well. Let's see here. I'm going to scan this list one more time just to make sure that we got everybody. Let's see. There was something here about counting bees. Here we go. So Kylie, we've got this question from Kylie about counting the number of bees entering the hive per minute. Does that indicate health or numbers? So this is something that is interesting to take note of when you go to a hive. But this is one thing that you may, instead of being specific about counting numbers of bees, because hives, a small colony will have a certain number of foragers who are coming and going, who might be going with this. The hive might be sending out the same percentage of foragers as a much larger hive that's sending out 2 or 3 times as many foragers. So it's hard to judge the number of bees coming out unless you know the other factors that go into it, the size of the colony and what time of the year it is and everything. But one thing that you might want to pay attention to is the number of foragers that are coming and going as compared to the same activity from a previous inspection. So if you notice a hive that is just always seems active and you're always seeing a ton of bees coming and going, that might just be the regular behavior of that hive. But if you see a hive that has like regular activity, and then you go out in the middle of the summer and you see like no activity, then that might tell you, without even opening the hive, that you might be dealing with a problem. And if you watch it a little bit longer and you see no activity, you might know that that colony may be dead before you even have to lift the outer cover. The same thing can be said about the nutrition coming into the hive. If you are watching that activity and you are seeing a ton of foragers come back with pollen pants, with those pollen granules on their leg, that will tell you that you've likely got brood that's being raised in the colony, and that will tell you that your colony is on a pollen flow and they've got some good nutrition coming in. And if they have a lot of it coming in and you have the appropriate equipment, you may even consider putting on a pollen trap to try to catch some of that if you are into consuming pollen. So it's tough to say that like just counting the bees themselves will indicate anything for you. I think it's really counting the bees and then being able to compare that number to previous observations, or to actually witness the actual quality of that activity, meaning that they're coming back with something, or that they look healthy coming and going, you know? So there you might look at some other characteristics than just the number of bees coming and going. That's a great question, and there's lots of beekeepers who are so in tune with the bees that they can just look at the entrance activity and know what's going on with the hive before they even dig into it. And that's something that I aspire to, and you know, being able to see these minute details and the little guards that are doing certain behaviors, or the amount of fanning that's going on, or whatever is happening at the entrance. You know, I still haven't cracked the code completely on how to read that, but you know, there's always room to improve, and there's always things that you can get better at with beekeeping. So we've got John saying he's been watching the honeybee hangout on Twitch, and you can see the bees bringing in pollen just west of DC. I would imagine they are finding pollen all over the place there, because we're seeing bees finding pollen up here, and we should be a little bit behind the bloom down there. So that's awesome, and that's awesome that they have you know, a camera on a hive. I'll have to check that out. We got this one from Tracy again. What's your opinion on powdered sugar dusting in the hive now for us in New York City? So, personally, I am not a fan of any of the manipulations with powdered sugar, whether it's dusting inside or using it to count mites. You can do a powdered sugar roll, which is similar to an alcohol wash, except that you are just putting the bees in a container full of powdered sugar. You're vigorously shaking them for 1 to 2 minutes, and then you are counting the mites that are coming off of them. In my view, that is very cruel to the bees, and a lot of people like it because the bees survive, they live, and you dump them back in the hive and they go on, hopefully they go on and live out the rest of their lives. But if you can imagine being put into a container and knocked around the inside of the container as vigorously as you would need to be to get all of the mites to release from you, you're going to be pretty banged up. And I think the fact that we can't see what damage has been done because the bees have exoskeletons, and the exoskeletons don't really take the damage. It's all the tissues inside. So for me, I think the more humane thing to do is to do the alcohol wash that kills the bees immediately, and it gives you a better mite fall off the bees. It gets more mites off the bees, better count, so more accurate, more humane, and just all around easier for me. So that's why I stick to that. But with that powder sugar roll, the idea is that the powder sugar gets under the mite's legs or pads or feet, and it can't hold on to the bee anymore, and it falls off. So why not dust the hive with powdered sugar, because it is edible after all, and let the bees roll around in it and get the mites all covered in it, and then they'll fall off. It's a great thought, but they've tested that out, and it's just not very effective in forcing the mites to fall. So at best, it's kind of a waste of time. At worst, if powdered sugar usually has other things like cornstarch and who knows what else in it, so you could be adding things into your hive that you don't know are there. So if you're going to treat your hive, if you're going to be serious about being in control of your mite population, then you really need to be using mite controls that are tested, that have research behind them that says that they are effective. If they're not effective, then move on to something else that is effective and that does what you need it to do. Because killing off 5% of the mites, you might be killing off the the worst 5% of the mites, meaning the least fit of the mites, just leaving the stronger mites. And that's a thought with all treatments. You know, this is a whole debate when you get into treatments and all of that. But, you know, if you're going to be serious about killing mites and treating the hive, I would use something that is going to do what it's supposed to do and not waste your time. So, with that, we are right at the top of the hour. It's 8 o'clock. For those of you who have been on with me the whole time, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. For those of you who ask questions, this is exactly why I'm here. This is why I come and do this. I love the fact that we had people from around the world on tonight, and we had people from right here in the city. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been recorded. We will be posting this soon, probably tomorrow, and so it will be available for you if you want to go back and review any of the sections. I did post in the comments and in the chat about the Honeybee Health Coalition, since we did talk quite a bit about mites. So I encourage all of you to go and check out their website, check out the tools and the resources they have, because they're fabulous. That's what I use when I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to treat with, or when I'm going to treat, or anything like that. So again, thank you so much. And until next month, we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.